The moment you explain yourself, you have accepted their court. You are now on trial. This is not a metaphor. It is a mechanical description of what happens the instant a man opens his mouth to justify what he has already done. The words feel like clarity. They feel like honesty. But something older and colder is happening beneath them. A transfer of authority. You have handed the gavel to someone who never earned it. And you did it voluntarily. Miyamoto Musashi understood this at a level most men never reach, because most men never face what he faced. In the winter of 1604, Musashi arrived at Ichijoji to meet Yoshioka Denshichiro, the second son of the most prestigious sword school in Kyoto, a man whose family had trained shoguns for 3 generations. The Yoshioka name was not merely reputation, it was architecture. Centuries of accumulated authority built into every room it entered. Musashi arrived alone, wearing travel clothes, carrying 2 swords, and said nothing. He had been challenged. He had accepted. He came. When Denshichiro demanded an account of himself, his lineage, his school, his master, Musashi looked at him the way a man looks at weather, something he would move through, not something he would negotiate with. The duel lasted 4 seconds. Denshichiro fell. Musashi walked away without explanation and without apology, and the silence he left behind was so absolute that the Yoshioka school spent the next decade trying to fill it. With rage, with accusations, with increasingly desperate attempts to make Musashi answer for what he had done. He never answered. He never needed to. The silence was the answer. What Musashi had internalized, though he would not have used this word, was Fudōshin, the immovable mind, not rigidity, not arrogance, something far more precise. The understanding that a man's center is not a feeling, not a mood, not a position in a debate. It is a fixed point around which everything else rotates. And the moment a man begins explaining himself, he has left that point. He is now rotating around someone else's center. He has become, without noticing it, an orbit. There is a man, call him what you want, you already know someone like him, in his late 30s, a project manager at a mid-sized firm in a city that does not matter to this story. He is competent. He is precise. He has spent 12 years becoming quietly indispensable in ways that no one above him fully understands, which is both his strength and the thing that is about to undo him. He arrives at work one Tuesday morning to find that a decision he made, a correct decision, arrived at carefully, over weeks, has been questioned in a group email by someone 2 rungs above him. The email is not aggressive. It is worse than aggressive. It is curious. It asks, in the language of collaboration, whether there might be other ways of looking at this. The man reads it 3 times. Then he begins to write his reply. This is where the story becomes a mirror. The moment before the mouth opens. He does not know, as his fingers move across the keyboard, that he is about to make the only real mistake available to him. The decision itself is not the mistake. The decision is sound. The mistake is what he is about to do with the doubt that has been placed, like a stone, in the middle of the path he has already walked. He is going to explain. He is going to take 12 years of judgment and distill it into 3 paragraphs that his superiors will read in 40 seconds, process as defensiveness, and file permanently under a category that has nothing to do with the quality of his work. He does not know this yet. He is still under the impression that clarity is a form of respect, that explaining himself will demonstrate intelligence and care, and the kind of collaborative openness that modern professional culture has spent 30 years teaching him to perform. He is wrong. But he cannot see that he is wrong because the wrongness is dressed exactly like virtue. Musashi wrote in the Book of Five Rings that the primary enemy of the warrior is not the opponent across the field. It is the event horizon, the moment when a man's own anxiety about the outcome begins to shape his behavior before the outcome has arrived. Musashi called this crossing at a ford, the dangerous middle passage between what is and what might be. And he was precise about what a man must not do in that passage. He must not accelerate. He must not contract. He must not speak from the place of needing the crossing to go well, because need is visible, and a visible need is a weapon someone else is now holding. The project manager sends the email. It is 3 paragraphs. It is thorough. It is well-reasoned and professionally toned, and it makes, in sequence, 5 distinct points that support his original decision. His superior reads it in 30 seconds, not 40. Types a single line in response. Good to know. Thanks. The thread dies. The decision stands. The project manager believes, for the rest of that week, that the explanation worked. He does not notice, cannot notice from where he is standing, that something in the room has shifted, that the next meeting runs slightly differently, that his name appears in conversations he is no longer quite inside of, what silence costs and what it buys. The ancient Japanese concept of the meaningful pause, the generative space between sounds, was not understood by practitioners as emptiness. It was understood as the most loaded moment in any sequence. The pause after a note, held correctly, does not merely separate what came before from what comes after. It transforms both. It makes the preceding note necessary and the following note inevitable. Remove the pause, and you have not shortened the music. You have destroyed its architecture. The samurai understood that the same principle operated in human confrontation. The silence after a challenge, held without flinching, without filling, did not merely communicate confidence. It restructured the entire field of the encounter. The challenger was suddenly no longer asking a question. He was waiting for permission to receive an answer. That permission never came. And in that absence, something fundamental redistributed. The project manager does not know about Emma, but he is about to learn what its absence costs. 3 weeks after the email thread, he is passed over for a role he was not officially being considered for, but was, in the way that organizations make decisions before they announce them, already assigned to him. A quieter man gets it instead. A man whose work is adequate and whose silence, misread as steadiness, has been catalogued in the minds of people who hold authority as a kind of ballast. The project manager is told, in the careful language of professional kindness, that there will be other opportunities. He returns to his desk. He begins, for the first time, to understand that he has been playing a game whose rules he never fully read. That the field of professional life, like the field of combat, is governed not only by the quality of one's decisions, but by the manner in which one inhabits them. That inhabiting a decision means, among other things, not returning to it when questioned. Not because the questioning is invalid, but because the return is the thing that makes the decision fragile. The doctrine of the unmoved. There is a passage in the Hagakure, Yamamoto Tsunetomo's meditation on the way of the samurai, that Western readers almost universally misread. Tsunetomo writes that a samurai must make his decisions within the space of 7 breaths. This is taken, almost always, as advice about decisiveness, about speed. It is not about speed, it is about finality. Tsunetomo is not saying decide quickly. He is saying that when the decision is made, it must be made in a manner that forecloses return. The 7 breaths are not a timer. They are a seal. Once the seal is placed, the man who placed it must become identical with it. He must not, under any pressure, stand at a distance from his own decision and begin explaining the distance. The seal and the man must be the same object. Anything less is not a decision. It is a draft. This is Fudōshin at its most architectural. The immovable mind is not the mind that feels nothing. Musashi felt everything, moved through fear like water through stone. It is the mind that does not relocate its center under pressure. It does not move from where it planted itself to go stand on someone else's ground and argue for its own validity. It stands. It waits. It allows the pressure to orbit it, which is the only thing pressure can do to something that will not move. The man who explains himself has done something precise and devastating. He has told the room that his center is negotiable. He has offered it up for review. And rooms, like sword schools, do not return what they are offered. They catalog it. The reframe. Here is what changes everything that came before it. The project manager, 3 weeks after losing the role, makes a different kind of decision. Not about his work, not about his strategy, but about something more fundamental. He decides to stop treating the opinions of others as a court he must appear before. This sounds, written plainly like that, like a piece of self-help advice. It is not. It is something far more structural. What he is actually deciding, though he would not use these words, is to reassign authority. To take back the gavel he has been handing out, unopened, since the first day he understood that other people were watching him. He stops writing explanatory emails, not because he becomes secretive or adversarial, because he realizes, with a clarity that arrives quietly and without fanfare, that every explanation he has ever offered was not a demonstration of intelligence. It was a petition, a request for ratification, a subordination of his own judgment to the judgment of whoever was close enough to question him. And he realizes, this is the part that changes the texture of everything before it, that no one ever asked him to do this. Not explicitly. Not once. He volunteered it. Repeatedly. For 12 years. He handed people a court they had not built, and then stood before it and argued for his own innocence, over and over, in a case that no one had actually filed. Musashi never appeared before the Yoshioka court because the Yoshioka court had no jurisdiction over Musashi. Not because Musashi declared this, because Musashi behaved as though it were simply true, and behavior, sustained long enough, does not merely reflect reality. It produces it. The door that doesn't reopen. 6 months later, the project manager makes another decision. A significant one, visible to the people above him. It is questioned again, in the same careful collaborative language, by the same man. The project manager reads the message. He does not begin typing. He sits with it for a moment, not strategically, not performing stillness, but because he is genuinely no longer afraid of the question. He is no longer inside the question. He writes 3 words. I'm confident here. He sends it. He returns to his work. The thread dies in 4 hours. No one follows up. The decision proceeds. And something in the room shifts again, but this time in a direction he recognizes, because he has read, somewhere he can't quite place, that the samurai who was hardest to move was never the one with the most arguments. He was the one who had already decided, before the challenge arrived, that the challenge was not a summons, that he was not required to appear, that showing up was optional, and he had chosen not to. not out of contempt, out of something quieter and more absolute, a settled relationship with his own judgment that required no external signature to be valid. Musashi died at 62, in a cave, writing. He did not have a school. He did not have disciples in the formal sense. He did not, in the final years, have opponents. He had long since moved past the arena where opponents are found, not because he had defeated everyone, but because he had arrived at a place where he no longer needed the fight to confirm what he already knew about himself. The cave was not isolation. It was the logical conclusion of a life lived from center. He wrote the Book of 5 Rings in the final weeks of his life, not as instruction, not as legacy building, not as an explanation, as a record. A man setting down what was true before he was no longer there to embody it. The project manager does not know this story, but 6 months from now, when a younger colleague asks him how he handles being questioned in meetings, he will pause, 7 breaths, though he will not count them, and say something simple, something that will not fully explain itself, and the younger man will leave the conversation with the faint, unresolvable sense that he missed the last word. That is the only transmission Fudōshin has ever made. Not through argument, not through demonstration. Through the quality of the silence a man leaves behind him when he walks out of a room that tried, and failed, to put him on trial. The door does not slam, it simply closes, and the room, left to itself, must decide what to do with an argument that no one stayed to receive.